Did you know that mirrors don't just reflect light? Old legends claim they absorb a piece of everyone who looks into them. That's why, after a death, mirrors are covered, to keep the soul from being trapped. But at Blackwood Manor, the mirrors were veiled while everyone was still alive. They were trying to keep something inside that was no longer human. "20 years had passed. The world had changed, but Blackwood Manor had only drifted deeper into its slumber. Only now did Clara finally dare to return to her parents' estate, a place that had stood abandoned for years, slowly decaying under the weight of time and oblivion. The heavy oak doors did not give way easily, as if the house itself were taking a deep, reluctant breath. Clara stepped into the hall. The air smelled of dust or old wood. In the center of the hall stood a massive floor-length mirror in a carved frame. It was veiled in coarse black wool. Clara stopped before it. Her hand involuntarily touched the fabric.
"Do not touch it, madam."
A dry voice echoed from the shadows of the corridor. It was the housekeeper.
"It has waited for your face for far too long. If you remove the veil, you give it permission to enter." When she emerged from this room, an hour later, she was the same woman, the same features, the same dress.
The housekeeper fell silent, staring at the veiled mirror.
But she was empty, as if someone had drained everything that made her human, leaving only a shell. She never laughed or grew angry again. She simply existed, like the furniture in this house. And in the evenings, I would find her here in the hall. She didn't remove the veil, no, she just stood before it and listened, as if the mirror were whispering something to her through the cloth.
Clara silently lowered her hand. She did not want to give the housekeeper the satisfaction of seeing her doubt. She spent the rest of the day wandering the empty corridors of Blackwood Hall. The house was frozen in time. Heavy drapes, dust-covered furniture, and those ubiquitous black cloths at every turn. When night fell, the house began to live with its own sounds. The creaking of floorboards, the sighing of the wind in the chimney. But the worst was the silence emanating from the veiled mirror in the hall. Lying in bed, Clara stared at the ceiling. The housekeeper's words about her empty mother spun in her head like a broken record.
"Enough,"
she hissed through her teeth. Rage suddenly displaced anxiety. She was tired of being afraid of fairy tales. She stood up. The cold floor stung her soles, but she walked straight to that same spot in the hall. The dark silhouette of the mirror under the black cloth looked like a tombstone in the middle of the hall.
"It's just glass."
Clara whispered to herself. She reached out sharply, grabbed the edge of the heavy wool, and ripped it down in one powerful motion. The fabric hit the floor with a dull thud. It was perfect. Smooth, deep, and surprisingly clean, as if it had just been polished. She did not cover the mirror back up, leaving the black cloth on the floor. She opened the windows, letting the sun into the dusty rooms, and even allowed herself an ironic smile when passing the open mirror in the hall. The housekeeper only watched her in silence, and there was no fear in her eyes, only a deep, almost pitiful sadness. Lying in bed, Clara was texting Mark, the light from the screen being the only thing piercing the darkness of the room. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by a rhythmic scratching on glass coming from the hall, where the mirror stood. She went downstairs, flipped the switch, and froze. In the window directly opposite the mirror sat a large black raven. The bird stared motionlessly through the glass. Clara exhaled in relief. It was just a bird. She reached for the light switch, but a chance glance into the mirror made her stiffen. In the reflection, the window and the frame were visible, but the sill was empty. The raven was not reflected in the mirror. The girl turned sharply toward the window, but at that moment, the bird flapped its wings and vanished into the night. "I imagined it. Just a trick of the light," she whispered to herself, turning off the light. Though a chill had already run down her spine, Clara spent the whole morning in the attic, sorting through trunks. Among the old mothballs and the scent of lavender, she found her mother's diary. The last pages were blank, except for one entry dated the day the mirror arrived. Written in a trembling hand, it does not show us. It only remembers. Clara closed the notebook. The mystery irritated her. Going downstairs, she involuntarily stopped by the large mirror in the hall. Sunlight fell on the glass, and that's when she saw it. A tiny crack, thin as a hair, in the upper corner. Clara was sorting through a stack of yellowed bills and letters in her mother's secretary desk. She came across a sheet with the watermark of the Morgan & Sons logistics firm, dated October 1924.
To the attention of Mr. Morgan, I demand an explanation. The mirror was delivered in perfect condition. I personally inspected it through the packing cloth. However, by the next morning, a deep crack appeared on the glass. This morning, there are already 3. My staff swears that no one has touched it. It is cracking from the inside, Mr. Morgan. It's as if the glass cannot withstand the pressure of what it holds within. Send a craftsman immediately, or I shall...
The letter broke off. Reading this, Clara felt a chill run down her spine. She dropped the paper and almost ran downstairs to the hall. She wanted to check that tiny crack she had noticed that morning. The crack was no longer a hair. It had grown like the root of a black tree, splitting Clara's reflection in half.
Mrs. Hutton!
She called out, not taking her eyes off the glass. Her voice broke into a rasp. The housekeeper appeared almost instantly.
Look at this.
Clara pointed her finger directly at the center of the fracture.
Madam,
The old woman said softly. There was no surprise in her voice, only anxiety.
what are you talking about?
The crack, right here in the middle. It's almost reached the frame.
There is nothing here, Clara. The glass is clear as a tear. I see only you, madam, and how you are trembling. Perhaps you should rest. The sun is already setting.
Clara locked herself in her room, her fingers trembling as she dialed Mark's number.
Mark, just come tomorrow. I need you to look at a mirror. No, don't ask anything. Just come.
The next morning, Clara was already waiting in the hall. She couldn't tear her eyes away from the glass. The cracks had grown. They now resembled a black web that almost completely crossed out her face. Finally, the sound of an approaching car, the slam of a door, and Mark's footsteps. Clara? He approached her from behind and hugged her tightly, resting his chin on her shoulder. You look like you haven't slept all night. What's wrong with this mirror? I only see us. Honey. He gently turned her toward him, looking directly into her eyes. The mirror is whole. It's old, the frame is a bit worn, but the glass, it's like new. Maybe it's a trick of the light, or you're just exhausted from the move. Let go of me, she screamed. She pushed Mark away with all her strength. He stumbled back, bewildered with pain and confusion in his eyes. Clara, what's wrong with you? I was just... Get out. Get out of this house. Mark tried to approach, but she grabbed a heavy vase from a side table and raised it threateningly. He stopped. Realizing he couldn't help her now, he slowly left. Clara locked herself in her bedroom, pushing a dresser against the door. She was awakened by a sound that couldn't be mistaken for anything else. Snap, snap, snap. It wasn't scratching. It was the sound of glass shattering into shards under immense pressure. Clara ran out of her room. Her bare feet barely touched the floor. She stopped on the upper landing. The moon, massive and cold, shone directly through the high hall window, bathing the mirror in a deathly white light. There were so many cracks that the mirror itself was barely visible, only a solid black web, while Clara breathed heavily, gripping the railing. Her double in the mirror slowly raised a hand and touched a large crack from the inside. Clara stood paralyzed, watching as her own double in the mirror pushed its fingers through the sharp shards of glass. "Thank you for letting me in," it whispered. The voice was identical to Clara's, but it held the coldness of a void. There was too much room for us both here. Clara's scream tore through the night silence of the estate, but it cut off as suddenly as it began. The next morning was sunny, creating a macabre contrast to the night's events. Mark drove up to the porch with a bouquet of light flowers. He felt guilty about yesterday and wanted to start over. He knocked, but there was only silence. He tried the handle. The door was unlocked. "Clara." He entered the hall and the flowers fell from his hands. Clara lay on the floor directly opposite the mirror. Her body was unnaturally stiff, and her eyes were wide open, filled with petrified horror. She was staring into the mirror, which now looked perfectly whole and smooth. Aftermath sirens of police and an ambulance broke the peace of Blackwood Hall. Orderlies carried out a stretcher with the girl's body covered in a white sheet. Mark sat on the porch steps, face in his hands. The ambulance doctor approached a police officer, wiping his brow. Preliminary cause, heart failure, obviously extreme fright. The heart simply couldn't take it, but the eyes, we can't close them. The muscles are as if petrified in that gaze. I've never seen anything like it. When the commotion died down and the police cars left, silence fell over the hall. Mrs. Hutton slowly approached the large mirror. She picked up the old black wool veil lying on the floor. She carefully, almost tenderly, veiled the glass, hiding the void within from the world.
"Sleep soundly.
She whispered, pressing her palm to the fabric.
Soon, I'll bring someone else to you."
She turned and walked into the depth of the dark corridor.